Hello, friends. Welcome to Peace and Power Ukraine, a place to discuss all aspects of policy related to this important country. It sits at the crossroads of modern history where freedom collides with totalitarianism. And that's really what we're going to discuss today. We want to make sure that during these unprecedented times, we're going to dig into the topics of the day, the headlines, of course, as always, but we're also going to talk about an important book. We're going to talk about some great pieces that you'll want to read as well. And that is because we are bringing back our first ever returning guest, Ambassador Gregory Slayton. He's a former U.S. diplomat, chairman of Slayton Capital, a Silicon Valley venture capitalist who's an early investor in Google and Salesforce. He's chairman of Family First Global and author of Portraits of Ukraine, a Nation at War. Portraits of Ukraine, a Nation at War. If you're watching on camera, you can see that book right here. So welcome back, Ambassador Slayton, from episode 6 all the way to, I think this is going to be 28 in the can. So glad to have you here, brother.
Wonderful, Gary. Always great to be with you. Deeply honored to be the first ever returning guest. Wow, that's a big deal, and I'm thankful for it.
Very good. Well, I know you have a lot to say on so much that's happening, but we should start off with the book. Remind our audience what this book is really about. And I hear you're going to be on a second printing. Is that right?
Yes. Well, thank you very much. The book is called Portraits of Ukraine, a Nation at War. And we were called into Ukraine. We have a family foundation that's all around the world. And I had the great honor of speaking to the Rada, the parliament, about 6 years ago. And just very shortly after the Russian invasion, within a month of the Russian invasion, some of the parliamentarians called me and said, a wonderful friend by the name of Victor, Gregory, we need your help immediately here in Ukraine. Anyway, so we are very honored to be able to go in with other many great organizations, obviously. And we've helped deliver about 17 million pounds of relief supplies from our base in Poland into the war zones of southern and eastern Ukraine. Now, I want to say right away, that wasn't just us. That was a partnership of a number of small faith-based organizations, as is ours. Ours is called Family First Global. We work in about 10 nations around the world, especially in tough nations, war zones and stuff. So 2.5 years ago, we realized, wow, this is going to be a long-term effort and we need to generate more revenue. We also need to help people understand the truth about Ukraine. Because as you know, Gary, the Kremlin spends, our CIA estimates, at least 1.2 billion with a B dollars a year on disinformation, what I call information warfare, spreading propaganda and lies and disinformation everywhere. So that was the beginning of the book. We had a team in Ukraine, a team in Poland, and a team in the United States. We thought it would take us about a year. It took us 2 years. And I think you can see, if you would hold that book up again, Gary,
Yeah.
maybe show our listeners the inside of the book also. Because it's both, I hope, very well written, but also very interesting because they're over it's 280 pages. We cover the history, the culture, the people of Ukraine. We cover the Russian invasion. And the final chapter is called Why Support Ukraine. So it's very detailed, very well documented, hundreds and hundreds of footnotes. And I think, I hope and pray that it makes a pretty good case for the fact that what Vladimir Putin is saying is wrong. Total lies. The fact, he said frequently, oh, Kiev was founded by Russians. Well, it's the exact opposite, as you know. And Moscow and St. Petersburg were both founded by people coming up from Kiev 1,000+ years ago. And Ukraine has been an independent, self-governing nation for 35+ years. Anyway, many, many things that we point out in the book. And thankfully, it's been a very successful bestseller. Maybe most importantly, we're giving all the profits to good Ukrainian charities. So I'm glad about that.
Yeah, you're up to 25,000 plus raised for Ukrainian charities with just what's happened in the first printing, now on to the second printing. I can tell you that it is a treasure trove of great information. It's full of history, which is important to understand. That Kyiv was in existence far beyond anybody even had a glimmer in their eye of Moscow.
So true.
And that's amazing history. I will tell you, on my most recent trip to Ukraine early this month, one of the folks that was on the trip carried a copy of your book with
Oh,
them, and throughout the trip was rereading portions as really a primer. And it is that thorough and authoritative. So congratulations on that great work.
well, thank you, Gary. We're honored. The Wall Street Journal, the Kiev Post, the National Review, a lot of wonderful reviews and endorsements. General David Petraeus and Mike Pence and a whole bunch of others. So we're thankful. But again, the whole effort is to really make sure Americans and all English speaking people understand the truth, because we can't make good decisions in the absence of truth.
Right.
So this is one of many efforts. Your podcast is
Yep.
another one. And anyway, we're just honored to be.
So tell me, Ambassador, why are you so passionate about this? Why did you get into this fight as aggressively? It's got to be more than just, 6 years ago some people asked me to.
Yeah.
You've got to feel this deep in your bones to be this invested.
Well, we do. And we believe, as I was just speaking to a big group here in North Texas the other day to celebrate Ukrainian Independence Day. And I said, look, I don't believe this is only Ukraine's fight. I don't believe this is only Europe's fight. I believe this is the fight of everyone who believes in freedom, democracy, and the rule of law. I mean, interestingly enough, you continue to hear from people like Tucker Carlson, who's just flat out lying, that there's religious freedom in Russia. Well, there is no religious freedom in Russia. There's religious freedom if you're Russian Orthodox. If you're any other faith, including Jewish or whatever, Muslim, there is no religious freedom whatsoever. And we've helped fund a publication which your readers might be interested in. You've probably seen this, Gary, with that documents at the time when it was printed in February, 500 plus Ukrainian churches and synagogues either destroyed, locked up, or their pastors, priests, or rabbis put in jail in the occupied territories of Ukraine. Now that number is over 700. So don't tell me, Tucker Carlson, that there's religious freedom in Russia. There's absolutely none. There's no freedom of assembly. There's no freedom of speech. And to test it, just go to Moscow, start speaking against Vladimir Putin. You'll be for 15, 20 minutes maximum. Then you'll be taken into the police and sent to the gulag or worse.
Yeah.
So I very much believe in freedom, democracy, and the rule of law. And that's why we're deeply involved.
Yeah, tremendous. Yeah. Give it about 15 minutes and FSB would be there to pick you up and usher you into the kind backseat of their car. That's for
Correct.
sure.
Correct.
Let's get some headlines now. You just wrote a piece in National Review titled "The Way Forward." Yeah, that you've got so many great articles here. I want to make sure I get the right one. This is the way forward for Ukraine after Alaska. And since then, we've had European leaders in the White House as well. So what does your roadmap look forward to as next steps?
Well, first of all, I just want to say everyone is for peace. Everyone is for peace. I mean, the destruction, like you, I was recently in Ukraine. Everyone has lost something, lost a family member, lost a friend, lost a home, lost a village, lost a job. Everyone has lost something important. And the people of Ukraine, the great news is that they're tired, as you know, Gary, they're tired, they're sick of war, but they're not going to bow the knee to Vladimir Putin and allow him to take over their country and impose his 25-year dictatorship on Ukraine. So that's the good news. It's great to see our European allies investing more in their own defense and the defense of Europe. It's great to see them stepping up to help arm Ukraine. And we in the United States obviously have done a great deal. But let's remember, how many American soldiers have died in this effort? Zero, right? So we are talking about one of our greatest adversaries. People forget that it's Russia that has armed Iran. It's Russia that has armed Hezbollah via Iran, Hezbollah, and all the different terrorist organizations that have hurt us and our allies so badly in the Middle East, right? So here the Ukrainians really are doing, and I'm not kidding, they're doing the work that on our behalf and on behalf of all democracies in disarming and greatly weakening Vladimir Putin. Now, as I said, everyone's for peace. We're for peace. I'm for peace. You're for peace. But Vladimir Putin, to quote my good friend Mike Pence, who endorsed the book, by the way, Vladimir Putin doesn't want peace. He wants Ukraine. That is
Mhm.
100% right. And you look at all the conditions that Putin puts on peace. Well, I'm for peace if Ukraine basically disarms, disassociates from NATO, sends back all the weapons that the West has sent them, basically lies down and, lets us roll over them. Well, no one is going to allow that to happen. So I believe we need to be strong. I love Ronald Reagan, my favorite president. I was a Democrat growing up. Ronald Reagan was president in my senior year at Dartmouth, and I became a Republican because I realized that guy is right. Peace comes through strength, not by begging dictators, oh, please, please, please.
Mhm.
This never works. We have to be strong. We have to show Putin that peace, real peace, is in his best interest also. And I believe that's coming because the Russian economy is in dire straits.
Right. One of the points I see here further down is you mentioned that there is legislation now pending in the US Senate. 85 co-sponsors have said, hey, it's time for more serious, very serious sanctions. Senate Majority Leader John Thune's for it. Speaker Johnson is for it in the House. It
Yes.
seems like the passage would be assured if they bring it up, and my sources tell me it's likely to come up in this when they come back in session in September. Also, a great deal of credit, I think, goes to Senator Lindsey Graham for bulldogging
Definitely.
this issue and talking with his good golf partner, President Trump, about this issue on a regular basis. I know you have relationships with a lot of these guys. Am I reading too much into this, or is that how you kind of see the likely legislative track here in September?
Yeah, no, I don't think you're reading too much into it. I know there are 85 Senate co-sponsors, which is a huge number.
Yes.
We also have a veto-proof majority in the House, led again by Speaker Johnson, a wonderful guy, just like John Thune. They feel strongly about this. And again, they want to be sure that this is in America's best interest. And I appreciate President Trump trying to force Putin to the table, but he's just not interested. So the truth is, after the meeting in Alaska, that very night, Russia sent dozens of drones and missiles at Ukrainian. They're not attacking Ukrainian military installations. They're attacking churches, hospitals, civilian apartments, schools, and they're attacking them and they're devastating them. Putin is not interested in peace by his own admission. By his actions, we can see that.
Mhm.
So we have to make sure that Vladimir Putin understands that peace, real peace, is in his best interests also.
One of the points you've made in your writings of late is the idea that even while President Trump has pushed to go directly to peace negotiations, it is still valuable to get a ceasefire agreed to first and foremost. Tell our audience a little bit more about why you do value that as a first step.
Absolutely. Thank you. Very important question. Let's ask ourselves who's against the ceasefire? Because when President Trump first proposed the ceasefire idea many months ago, President Zelensky right away agreed. He said, yes, we will agree to a ceasefire absolutely unconditionally right now. It was Putin that said, well, no, we have to solve the underlying conditions, which really that's Putin speak for we want to own Ukraine, right?
Right.
And he's continued to oppose the ceasefire. And why? Because he continues to throw millions of men at Ukraine. He's losing an estimated 500 to 1,000 members of the Russian armed forces daily. That is a meat grinder. As you know, Gary, he's estimated to have lost over 1 million men, wounded, killed, and seriously wounded. But Putin doesn't care. Zelensky, he has to care. He's running a democracy. When people protested recently in Kyiv, he changed his mind on an important
Right.
piece of legislation, which was the right thing to do.
Hmm.
Putin, he doesn't care at all. You protest, you get thrown, as you said, the KGB, the FSB shows up, they cart you away, you disappear, you're in a jail for the rest of your life. So, yes, a ceasefire is important because there are just too many people being killed and wounded, not just military on both sides, but also in Ukraine, civilian casualties are through the roof. One of the nonprofits that we are so proud to support in Ukraine is a charity that helps young people, kids, to get prosthetic arms and prosthetic legs when they've lost their arms or legs to Russian landmines or Russian drones or whatever. I mean, the wounds and the deaths among the civilian population are huge. So that's why we need a ceasefire. And I hope that President Trump continues to push for
Hmm.
that. And I hope, although I'm not real optimistic, that Putin will finally agree.
Well, there might be a little bit of a game changer that could bring Putin to agreement of a ceasefire. And that's news out of Kyiv just this morning, their time, I think. President Zelensky said that their defense industry now has the ability to produce their own long range offensive missiles.
Yes.
And that could be a game changer. What Putin has been doing to Kyiv and to Lviv and to Odessa
Yeah.
and so many other Ukrainian cities with long range missiles, maybe that type of impact will now be felt in Moscow, in St.
Right.
Petersburg, in places where it's not just the lower classes that are being sent death notices. All of a sudden this war would become real for every strata of society and indeed the governing class. And that threat, maybe that could lead to an actual ceasefire agreement.
Well, I hope you're right. I hope you're right. And I personally feel that under Biden and now under Trump still, we have prohibited our Ukrainian partners from using our long range missiles to strike military installations. Now, let me make a point there. Ukraine has never, as far as I know, has never targeted civilian installations. Of course, sometimes missiles or drones go astray, but
Right.
never targeted them. Whereas Putin, I was at visiting a large children's hospital in Kiev. You've probably been there. The next day,
Yes.
Putin's forces double tapped. Okay, they sent in a missile. They waited about an hour so that ambulances and stuff could gather. And then they sent in another missile. In other words, that was no accident. They
Right.
double tapped to cause the largest number of civilian casualties. They do that all the time. The other day I was in Kiev, standing in front of an elementary school that had been completely destroyed and children killed in that blast. So the Russians are trying to discourage and demoralize the Ukrainian population by every single day hitting civilian resources. So I agree with you 100%, Gary. I'm thrilled that the
Mhm.
Ukrainians now have the capacity to fire long range missiles at military installations,
Right.
and hopefully this dramatically weakens the Russian war machine.
Yep. They've already suffered some air raids that shut down their airports. So
Yes, correct.
those in Moscow are dealing with some economic effects from billions that are lost in shutting down of airports, commercial trade. So there's the military side, but then there's the economic side. In your
Yeah.
July 28th New York Post piece titled "Trump Can Apply Real Pressure on Russia's Collapsing Economy," you address some of the economic tools that are at our disposal. Unpack that a little bit more for our audience.
Well, there's a number of sanction options. Trump already has slapped sanctions on India. You probably know, Gary, that India and China together import 80% of Russia's crude oil. 80%. And that money is directly funding Putin's war machine. So I would love to see the sanctions bill, the Lindsey Graham's sanctions bill that we were talking about earlier, get passed. But in the meantime, it's great to see President Trump sanctioning India. I hope that he'll do the same thing with China and other nations, and also strengthening our sanction policy. Russia has this shadow fleet, as you know, that they're using to export oil and natural gas. Well, we need to shut that down. We just need to shut that down. And again, I don't want to penalize regular Russian people. Normal Russian people are not the problem here. The problem is that Vladimir Putin has militarized the entire nation, and it's all about defeating Ukraine. The economy is in dire straits. Inflation rate is, depending on who you listen to, the official inflation rate is above 11. People talk about inflation rate being in the 15 to 20% a year. The price of eggs have tripled. The price of bread has doubled. Just on and on. The Russian economy is in dire straits. Interest rates now are, if you can get a loan, which you can only get a loan if you're part of the military industrial complex, that's going to cost you 19% a year. Imagine, Gary, trying to run a company on 19% a year interest. The net, and you can't find employees because they've all been sucked up by the military industrial complex. Entire industries are failing. The coal industry, for instance, the transportation, domestic tourism industry, everything. There are many, many industries that are failing, and Russia is the economy is in dire straits.
Yeah, it's time to continue to push with every tool that's available, and Putin's bluff has to be called. I think that's
Yes.
another idea that you had thrown out there. And in these coming weeks, when every tool from the American perspective, from the EU perspective, internationally, can be leveraged, that's when that squeeze, that tightening,
Yeah.
all of those are individual tentacles can really play a role together, because the
Mm-hmm.
tentacles, like you said, they go all the way to India. They go all the way to Modi in New Delhi,
Right.
deciding, okay, I am going to join the West and be westward focused, and I'm going to be buying U.S. oil and others in the West, or I'm going to be going to Russia. And if Modi realizes, I think in his long term interests, it's
Yes.
westward oriented, not with Russia and China. That's going to be important. How do you see him reacting to this from an economic standpoint? He's in a tough spot.
He's in a very tough spot. He's in a very tough spot. India is not a wealthy nation. It is the world's largest democracy, so it's a natural ally to us. But they have been, as you know, a long term recipient of Russian military aid. So Modi is in a tough spot. I'm not sure that we played that card the best way that we could. I'm not sure that we
Right.
did that properly from a diplomatic perspective, but Modi needs to decide now, exactly as you say, whose side we're gonna be on. Right? There's no straddling the fence here. You're either for dictatorship and continued aggression, or you're not. Now, remember that Modi is in a little bit of a tough place also, because his country's been in numerous battles with China, right?
Right.
So what about if China, which by and large is thought to have the larger and more powerful military, what about if they just decide, okay, we're just going to take this, this disputed place up in Kashmir, right? That is not the way we want the world to work. The powerful and the aggressive can take whatever they want. That's not the way
Mm-hmm.
forward for our world. So hopefully Modi sees that his country is really much better suited to go with the West. Yes, it's going to be an economic hit because the oil and gas he's buying from Russia is deeply discounted because of the sanctions pressure. But now, hopefully, he'll understand that the long term future for India is so much brighter, siding with the West and working with America and the EU. And I believe he will. The Indians are certainly not stupid, and they're intelligent, and they understand. As recently, a Politburo member in China secretly was talking with his colleagues and said, look at our allies. Our allies are the worst countries in the world: North Korea, Iran, Russia. We've been led down a diplomatic cul-de-sac. This is a Chinese
Mm-hmm.
Politburo member, and we must break out of it. I believe the Indians feel the same way.
Right. Yeah, that's an important point. So let me ask you about your optimism. In recent weeks, some people have gotten pretty optimistic that peace might be around the corner. It certainly doesn't always feel that way. There was one Ukrainian leader that was so optimistic, and this is General Zaluzhny, who's in London now as the ambassador for Ukraine there. He went so far as to announce, peace is probably around the corner. We're going to have elections, and I'm going to be standing for election.
Yeah, that's right.
Announced
That's
like
right.
a whole campaign team,
Yeah.
campaign managers. There's bios and different. It seemed a little premature to me, but that's how optimistic he was.
Yes. Yes.
So,
Yeah.
any commentary on that, and then just your personal level of
Yeah.
optimism for peace right now? Earlier, you made me think maybe you're not so optimistic.
Well, I am optimistic by nature. That's the way God made me. I do believe that in the end, good triumphs. I really do. People can call me naive or silly or whatever. That's fine. That's what I believe. But there is certainly a lot of sacrifice, a lot of hard work. And as Churchill said back in the Blitz, blood, sweat, and tears. I like the general very much and I respect him. I think, like you, I agree, way too early to begin his election campaign and way too early to declare peace because peace takes a partnership. And Vladimir Putin, again, has been infinitely clear that he doesn't really want peace. He doesn't want a ceasefire. He doesn't want peace except on his terms, which is basically that Ukraine rolls over and dies. And the Ukrainian people, I've been there many times, you've been there many times, they're not going to accept that. Some kind of a land swap, yes. But Putin wants the entire Donetsk region, including that battlefield fortress that Ukraine set up.
Mm-hmm.
That would constitute the single biggest military victory for Putin in the whole war without firing a shot. It would be completely criminal and nuts for Ukraine to give him that, and they won't do that. They won't do that. So I'm not optimistic about peace in the next few months. I am very hopeful that we'll see peace in 2026 because, again, the Russian economy is grinding to a halt. I just want to make this point. People say, yeah, but employment, full employment, blah, blah, blah. You got to remember that in a war, what it is that Russia is taking billions of dollars every week and putting it into a pit and burning it. There's no benefit for Russian civilians. There's no benefit for Russian industry. In fact, they're turning civilian factories, as you probably know, into factories that are making bullets and bombs and tanks and stuff. That's very, very ineffective, very ineffective. And it really cripples the Russian civilian economic infrastructure. So the Russian economy is far weaker than most people understand. And I think 2026 when basically the National Rainy Day Fund will be out of money. They're going to have to make some very difficult decisions that will impact the general population, and that will not be popular.
Yeah, that's real foreshadowing. Ambassador Gregory Slayton, before we get to the last question, I'll just mention, if we do get to peace, it's not as if then elections can immediately happen. There is so much that has to occur.
Yeah.
You have millions of people that are displaced internally.
Yeah.
Then you have a diaspora of Ukrainians, upwards of 7 million plus that are
Right.
around the world. Some might want to come back. Some may want to still vote from afar. Then you have all of the soldiers that are on the front lines. That doesn't even mention which ones will be back in civilian areas, which ones will still be at the front lines. So running an election is not just simply something where, we got peace, turn on the spigot. We can make this happen. This is going to be a very difficult thing. So, feel free to comment on that. And of course, if there's anything else you didn't get to share with our audience, that you'd just be kicking yourself if you didn't get to mention here as we close out.
Well, thank you, Gary. It's always great to be with you. You're absolutely right. There's a huge amount to be done once peace is secured. First job, we must secure a just and lasting peace. To give Putin 6 months to rearm his soldiers, get more mercenaries from North Korea or whatever, and then attack Ukraine again, that's stupidity. Let's not do that, right? Let's have a just and lasting peace. Then there's a tremendous amount of work to do healing, right? I know you're involved, and we're very much involved with organizations that are working on physical healing, also mental healing. There's a great deal of anguish. And then let's just talk about the estimated $800 billion to $1 trillion in reconstruction. I mean, the death and destruction in Ukraine has been, almost biblical. And the amount to rebuild is going to be something that the entire world is going to have to get together on. Again, my guesstimate, reading different estimates and talking with different folks who are planning for the reconstruction, is approximately $1 trillion. Now, I certainly want to see Vladimir Putin, who every single Western intelligence agency identifies as the wealthiest person in the world. And just think about that. Here's Putin. He is the wealthiest person in the world. How did that happen? I'll let your smart readers figure that out. Again, remember, Russia is a mafia state. So I'd love to see Putin contribute to the, healing and the redevelopment of Ukraine. Certainly it's going to be a global effort. It's going to be a big effort. And I believe that elections probably won't be able to happen for months until there is the infrastructure, the peace and security needed to run a fair and free election.
Yep. Great. Well, you did not disappoint as our first returning guest, Ambassador Gregory Slayton, author of Portraits of Ukraine, A Nation at War. Please pick it up on Amazon. Lots of the proceeds will go to support Ukrainian charities. And thank you, friends, for joining us once again. Peace and Power Ukraine, for important discussions. And please pray for a just peace. Thank you, Ambassador. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Gary. Always good to be with you. God bless you, my friend.
Thank you all. See you next time.